Kevin sat in his office, sprawled in a leather chair. He was a young 30-year-old man with a tired look and wrinkles on his forehead that didn't match his age. Kevin was deep in thought. It was raining outside the window, and the gray clouds that hung over the city seemed to reflect his inner state. His little sister Elizabeth, who had always been his parents' favorite, was missing. Kevin adored his sister, took care of her, tried to replace her parents after their death, forgave her all her faults. Probably, therefore, Elizabeth grew up selfish. Kevin repeatedly tried to involve her in work and family business, but all his efforts were in vain. She categorically refused to work. Their last quarrel broke out when he returned home to find a crowd of her friends having a party in his absence. The house was very noisy. The guests invited by Elizabeth were not silent. The music was playing at full volume. Kevin walked over to his sister and said, "Elizabeth, I'm tired of your parties. Don't you realize that? You only want money for your friends. I don't want them in my house anymore. Let them go. I need to rest." "But it's my house too," my sister shouted. "This is your parents' house, and if you want to spend time with your friends, you can rent an apartment. But you're not getting another penny from me. You want to party with your friends, go to work. I'm gonna leave the house altogether. I don't want to see or hear from you." "Forget that you had a sister," Elizabeth said in a fit of anger. With these words, she left the house and has been missing ever since. Kevin looked for her everywhere, but all his attempts were in vain. In desperation, he hired a private detective to search for his sister, but so far he had not heard from him. The restaurant that she and her sister had inherited from their parents after their tragic deaths had become more trouble than joy. The situation was made worse by the fact that business at the restaurants had gotten bad. Kevin tried to figure out exactly what had gone wrong. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing control of the business his parents had built. Revenue was falling, customers were complaining about the service, and the atmosphere in the restaurant had become sullen. He has to do something to get things back on track. Kevin decided to take an unusual step. The next day, Kevin gathered the employees in his office. "I'm going on a business trip for a week," Kevin announced to his employees at the morning meeting. "I hope you can manage without me. Steve, as restaurant manager, you're in charge. Also, I've hired a new employee. He'll be working as a second assistant cook. He'll be starting tomorrow. So Steve, you're the administrator. Please familiarize the new employee with his duties. Don't be frightened by the new employee's appearance. His face was damaged in the fire, so please be understanding." Everyone wished Kevin good luck on his business trip and promised to keep the restaurant in order. However, Kevin had no intention of leaving at all. His friend Jessica, who worked as a makeup artist, changed his appearance, and the next morning, disguised beyond recognition and slightly changed his voice, he appeared at work. Under his new name Michael, Kevin entered the restaurant and immediately caught the attention of the receptionist. The administrator, not suspecting anything, decided to assign him to Helen, one of the most experienced assistant cooks. "Helen, this is Michael. He's the new assistant cook. Show him how things work around here," the manager said and went off to do his own thing. Helen, a short girl with bright eyes and a kind smile, gave Michael a friendly nod. "Hi, Michael. Nice to see a new person on our team. Let's start in the kitchen," she said and led him inside. The kitchen was bustling with life. The cooks were cooking. Someone was chopping vegetables. Someone was mixing sauces. and the waiters were scurrying back and forth, picking up the finished dishes. Helen showed Michael where all the necessary tools and products were and explained the basic processes and rules. "Everything here works like a well-tuned machine. I think you'll do fine," she remarked. Kevin listened to her carefully, trying to get the gist of the job he was going to be working at for a while. "Helen, would you peel the potatoes quickly? We've got customers coming in any minute." "The table's booked," shouted Chris, the cook. "Come on, Michael, join us. Our potatoes are rotten." "It takes a long time to peel them," said the girl. "Why is it rotten?" Michael asked. "Because that's the kind of potatoes the manager bought. The restaurant manager trusts him completely, and he takes advantage of it." "I wish I could get the receptionist to peel those potatoes," said Chef Chris. "Who's going to make him do that?" "He's our second in command. He's lost his conscience," Helen said with a smile as she continued to peel potatoes. "Damn him to hell," shouted the cook again. "Why do we need such an administrator? It's about time the chief replaced him." "So tell the chief. He probably doesn't know what the receptionist is doing behind his back," said Michael Kevin. "Who's gonna listen to us?" The chief, unfortunately, considers Steve his friend. "Let's hurry up and clean. Our job is to please our customers now, not to talk," Helen replied. Michael Kevin wrinkled his face unhappily as he saw Helen struggling to find good potatoes. "Helen, is the bowl like that too?" Michael Kevin asked. "And onions and cabbage and carrots," Helen sighed. "If this keeps up, I'm going to work at the restaurant next door. I've been invited there for a long time." "Wait, take your time, Helen," Michael Kevin said. Working side by side with Helen, he quickly realized that she really knows her craft and puts her heart and soul into her work. In between, he tried to strike up conversations with other employees to gather more information. As time went on, it became clear to him that the atmosphere was tense, and the manager, Steve, seemed more concerned with his own personal gain than with the welfare of the restaurant. In addition, he behaved arrogantly and rudely with the staff. One evening, when the restaurant was already empty, Michael Kevin was the last one left in the kitchen, cleaning up after his shift. Helen came up to him and said, "Michael, you seem like a good man, so I want to tell you something," she began, lowering her voice. "Our receptionist, Steve, has been stealing money from the cash register and hiding it from the owner. We all know it, but we're afraid to do anything about it. The chief might not believe us, and we'd lose our jobs. So if you want to work, you'd better not argue with the manager." "Thank you, Helen," he said, looking confidently into her eyes. A week later, early in the morning, Kevin called the receptionist and told him to have all the staff gather in his office. "Michael, let's go to the chief's office. He's on a business trip, and he's inviting everyone in," Helen said. "Go ahead. I'll be right there," Michael Kevin replied. All the employees gathered in the chief's office, but he was not inside. What was the surprise of the staff when Michael, the assistant chef, came into the office and sat down in the chief's chair. "Excuse me for this masquerade," Kevin began, "but I had to find out what was going on within the team." "Steve, I know everything," he said firmly to the manager, who was speechless. "You've been stealing the restaurant's money and undermining its reputation. You betrayed my trust. Go away. I fired you." Steve, realizing that he had been exposed, tried to justify himself, but Kevin was adamant. Instead of Steve, he appointed Helen as acting administrator. Her honesty and dedication were obvious to everyone. Things were finally starting to get better at the restaurant. Now Kevin had nothing to worry about. The staff was working smoothly again, and customers were returning satisfied with the service and the quality of the food. Kevin, having returned to his duties, realized that sometimes it was necessary to literally step into someone else's skin to understand what was really going on. There was one more problem to solve, and it was the most important. Ever since his sister Elizabeth had disappeared, Kevin's life had become an endless search and anxiety. Kevin tiredly put the menu back on the table and sighed. Today he would finally get an update from the private investigator he had hired to find her. The hope that he would finally find his missing sister Elizabeth had been tormenting him for months now. The private investigator came to his restaurant, and Kevin knew right away that the news was not going to be easy. "Kevin, I found her, but there are nuances," the detective began, taking a seat across from me. Kevin tensed, preparing for the worst. "Your sister was seen among the homeless." I questioned several of them, showing them the photo. They confirmed they'd seen a girl like that, but she was acting strange, couldn't remember anything, nobody from where. And then she disappeared again, just walked out of there. Kevin felt his heart ready to burst with pain for his sister. How was it that his favorite sister ended up on the streets? He clenched his fists on the table to somehow take away the pain. He couldn't imagine how his gentle, smiling Elizabeth had ended up at the bottom of his life. "Keep searching, please," he whispered. In the evening, after a hard day at the restaurant, Kevin got into his car and drove to the nearest supermarket. He needed to buy something to take home. As he pulled up to the supermarket and got out of the car, he saw a strange sight. A security guard was chasing a homeless woman away from the entrance. As he passed by, Kevin heard her voice. "I have nowhere to go. Please don't chase me away," she pleaded. Kevin froze. It was a voice he would recognize among 1,000. His heart pounded frantically. It was Elizabeth, but she looked nothing like he remembered her. She was now a ragged, dirty, faded-looking young woman. The blood ran cold in his veins. "Elizabeth, Elizabeth," he shouted, rushing toward her. "I'm sorry, sir, but you must be mistaken. I'm not Elizabeth, although I don't remember my name. It's me, your brother Kevin." The young woman stopped and looked at him for a long time, as if trying to remember something. Finally, she answered quietly, "Excuse me, but I don't remember anything." "Elizabeth, let me take you to the hospital. The doctors will help you there. You'll remember everything." Kevin, barely holding back tears, gently took her under his arm and put her in the car. He drove Elizabeth to the hospital, where the doctors examined her and diagnosed amnesia, prescribed treatment, and put her in a room. Kevin never left his sister's side. Thanks to the doctor's efforts and his brother's constant presence, Elizabeth's memory began to return. It turned out that her young man, having learned that Elizabeth would no longer have money, decided to leave her. When she begged him to stay, he roughly pushed her away and she hit her head on the corner of a table. After losing consciousness, she was left without help and her boyfriend ran away in a panic. When Elizabeth regained consciousness, she remembered nothing. She began wandering the streets until she found herself among the homeless and then found refuge near a supermarket where passers-by sometimes bought her food out of pity. Kevin was beyond angry when he learned of his sister's former lover's betrayal. He swore that he would answer for what he had done. but his main concern right now was Elizabeth's health. He sat by her bedside for hours, telling her about their childhood, about the happy times they had spent together. Every day Elizabeth was getting better. She was already smiling, beginning to remember events from the past. Kevin was happy. In this story, Kevin not only found his sister, but also realized that family is the most important thing in life, and the love and support of loved ones can help overcome any difficulties.